The upcoming vice presidential debate between Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz is shaping up to be a key moment in the final stretch of the election. With both candidates relatively unknown on the national stage, this high-profile face-off could be a turning point in the closely contested race. Vance, a first-term senator from Ohio, and Walz, the governor of Minnesota, are set to compete for voter attention in a deeply polarized political landscape, with early voting already underway.
What's normal, both of these VP picks are fairly unknown. Walz was a surprise among Democrats who thought that it would be sort of bigger name people from swing states, for example. And for Vance, this was also a bit of a surprise pick on Trump's part. So I think, yeah, neither of them were ever in kind of the national spotlight in the way that previous picks were. So, Barack Obama choosing Joe Biden had much more national recognition at that point.
Political scholars are closely watching the debate, with some highlighting the surprise factor in both candidates' selection. John V. Kane of New York University pointed out that Vance and Walz bring fresh perspectives despite their lower national profiles.
To be able to count on.
There are moments where we can kind of realize that this debate is not so much about how one candidate performs against the other, so much as how one candidate is performing against expectations. So a good example of that, I think, would be Sarah Palin and Joe Biden in 2008, where the expectation was kind of that she was going to do terribly against Biden, a much more experienced politician than her. And she sort of held her own fairly well. It was not the disaster that some were predicting. And in that way, it was a success for her, even if it doesn't shift the polls too much.
Georgetown University's Nadia Brown emphasized Walz's distinctive communication style, which combines his folksy Midwestern charm with substantial policy insight, making the debate even more intriguing.
And so Tim Walz is already proved to be a really adept communicator. He's weaving in, right, like this Midwestern folksy, kind of response to politics, as well as these dad jokes and dad isms. But then he's also able to talk about policy, right? Someone who's been in Congress for a long time, someone who served as a mayor. He understands right, the real world issues, but can talk about them in ways that don't sound so policy wonky-ish.
Analysts agree this could be a crucial moment for both campaigns as they work to sway the remaining undecided voters in a race that's too close to call.
We can expect this issue of immigration, especially the use of the stories, given what we saw in the previous debate, the cat-eating, dog-eating stuff. I imagine that would come up, as well as Vance's statements about, using these sorts of stories to bring an issue to national attention. I think that he can quickly pivot from that to the issue of immigration. So getting him to focus on, is it right to really exaggerate these stories, based on minimal evidence? Is it right to do that? Should you be doing that on such a sensitive topic? Again, I think that Vance is a skilled communicator and won't spend very long on that. Without just pivoting to the severity of what they would deem the immigration crisis.
The stakes for this debate are particularly high, as both Vance and Walz aim to prove their appeal to key voter bases.
Well, unfortunately, I think the train has left the station. There's not much that the Republicans can do to walk back what's already been done. Donald Trump's nomination of 3 conservative Supreme Court justices have really opened up Pandora's box of what happens when we repeal liberties that were found to be unconstitutional. And I think what we're going to see from Walz and what we'll continue to see from Kamala Harris is painting Republicans extreme on this measure.
Vance is expected to lean heavily on his populist messaging and strong ties to working-class voters. while Walz will likely showcase his executive experience and straightforward rhetoric to connect with a broader audience.
Modern American politics.
We know that Vance has a background that is fairly humble beginnings, and is not a wealthy background like Trump's. So that is a nice kind of offsetting. Walz can't necessarily attack him on that, but he certainly can attack the Trump and Vance campaign on the policies that they represent that don't do much to help working class voters. In this way, I think Walz has a little bit more the advantage in saying, look, my background is, I'm a very normal guy with a normal background, and I advocate policies that benefit normal people the most. And so I think that that's a line of attack that we'll most likely hear, even if Vance's own background is still somewhat relatable and fairly, a fairly impoverished background in terms of where VP picks in the past have traditionally been.
Donald Trump still hasn't conceded that if he loses the election, he will not, he will admit that he did not win and will have a peaceful transfer of power. And I think that JD Vance is going to have to stick really close because he's second in command here. He's going to have to stick very close to Trump's position on this. And Trump, we saw through the debate, has doubled down and said that he didn't have anything to do with January 6th, and that he sees that the people that were arrested for breaching the Capitol are martyrs. And so JD Vance is going to have to stick really close to the position that Trump has already laid out, which doesn't make it seem like there won't be another January 6th. In fact, I'm more scared of December 17th, where states have to certify the elections. And I think we might have many January 6s happening all over the country.
With the polling, even after the presidential debate that we watched, we didn't see polls shift a whole lot, even though that debate was fairly explosive and had some pretty, memeable moments. It didn't shift things all that much. So I wouldn't expect this to do much. That being said, we know that this is a very, very, very close race. And so thought about from another perspective, you have maybe 5 or 6% of the electorate still on the fence, still undecided, and little things could push them in one direction or another.
With the election just weeks away and voter turnout becoming increasingly critical, this debate could play a decisive role in shaping the final outcome, making it a must-watch event for political observers and the general public alike.